Hi, this is Yvonne Shu from Trustworthy Herbs. Hello again, and today we're going to talk about where the herbs are from. And we talk about Chinese herbs, and someone will ask me, are they all from China? And the answer is mostly yes. And some of the herbs, no. For example, saffron. Saffron, the best saffron is in Iran. And there are also American ginseng, which is the best is from Wisconsin. The thing is that in our Chinese herbs, we are very, very serious and focused on where the herbs are from. Because many years ago, I don't know how many, our ancestors figured out certain herbs from certain places are better than other places. And so they have this encyclopedia of where the herbs are from, where are they from are better. And even though maybe you think you might be right, check with the authorities on this, with those encyclopedias. Don't trust your website. And so we're very particular of where certain herbs are from. And many of the herbs are named based on which part of China they're from. So you're talking about longitude and latitude, but you're not just talking about longitude and latitude. You're talking about also altitude, because it's really important in some herbs what kind of mountains or in which mountains that they're from. And so again, let me give you an example of our Wisconsin's American ginseng. It's really famous. It's really famous because how potent they are. And most of the farmers there, it's pretty good. They have pretty good soil. But not just that. They're famous because where that ginseng is, they have very, very, very strict regulations of how they farm those ginsengs. In the same area, just across the borders, where in Canada you can also get American ginsengs, where they farm a lot of American ginsengs. But many of the qualities is greatly reduced because the regulations are not so strict. But again, the opposite is true, where we actually found quite a few good Canadian farmers that farms really good American ginsengs in Canada, just across the borders. Pretty good prices too. And this is where you have to be careful, and you need to know what you're doing to know where your herbs are from and from which farm. I kind of just want to give you an example of goji berries, and these are very commonly used berries. The most famous goji berries, if you're into these things, they're from Ningxia in China, a very particular place in China. And a lot of Chinese know, the goji berries are supposed from there. But the truth is, it's kind of like a really small area. And there's no way that they can supply all the goji berries for the whole world. So you have other farms that does goji berries. Again, a lot of good farms, a lot of bad farms too. And when I talk about, I think it's more important for the farms to have good soils to farm these things. And some farmers really love their soils. They get really, really good herbs, okay, no matter where they are at. But some people, I don't know what they're doing. I just don't. The reason why is, you see these little goji berries, they're supposed to be really potent in vitamin A. And right now, I mean, in market, I won't even name which market. You can go to market and then you can get certified organic goji berries, and they don't have any vitamin A in it. So it doesn't matter to me if it's certified organic. Like, there's nothing in it. Come on. So it comes down to which farm and farmers who take pride to farm these things. The best of the best of the best goji berries in Ningxia goes to the rich and the famous Chinese, not to you, and not to me, probably most of the time. People used to have these things as really expensive gifts for the rich and the famous. Not for you and me, okay? And so these goji berries, the best ones, they cost a couple $100 per pound, USD. Sad but true. Sometimes you cannot pin me down on a source, because sometimes it is from Ningxia, sometimes it's from places that's around Ningxia. And but again, it's really important to check where the source of your herbs and their potency. But I think once you start to get into herbs, you'll start to have a feel for these things. For example, a lot of my customers knows how good that shipment of goji berry is, because they can feel it, they can see it. They know, not because how big they are or how beautiful they are. They just know the quality of their herbs. And these things you learn, you try, you get some good herbs, some bad herbs, so you know which one you're looking for. But one of a rule of thumb with the Chinese herbs is to check where they are from. Hi, this is Yvonne Shu from Trustworthy Herbs again, and today we are going to talk about the harvesting of these herbs. And again, this is in the textbook, but I want to add my spin to it, so hopefully it will make more sense to you. The harvesting of these herbs and the farming of these herbs is really depending on what kind of plants you're looking at. Some plants, for example, the Huangqi or Astragalus, they take about 4 or 5 years at least, or the ginseng takes 4 or 5 years, so they're more expensive. But some herbs, where if they're harvesting twice a year, you know, usually you can get a pretty good price for it. So there's different parts of the plants are used for different things. And one of the things used pretty common, other than the roots, is the flowers of many things. For example, roses or honeysuckle. These flowers, we usually would like to use them when they're not opened. So when they're harvesting, it's still they're not opened. Once these flowers open, like roses or honeysuckle, that they don't have that, they're not that potent, or they don't have that much use of medicinal use. You can use them as tea, but they just don't work as well on diseases. So roses, honeysuckle, we harvest them usually when they're not opened. Again, when they're open, you can still use them just as regular tea, not for any particular purpose. Most of the herbs, if they don't get any bugs in it or any mold in it, you can comfortably keep that herb for more than 3 years, I will say. They don't go bad that much. And when you ask about the freshness of a certain herb, well, see, there's different herbs. I find it in certain Latin herbs, not Chinese herbs, Latin herbs, that in certain herbs, the freshness really matters. Or ginger, the freshness of ginger, that really matters. But most of the times in Chinese herbs, a lot of the times, the longer they are, the better they are. You might think orange peel is just orange peel. No, it's not. When I first learned language and they say this is an orange, I'm like, orange. And so one day I brought a Chinese tangerine with me for lunch. And I goes to my teacher, orange. And my teacher goes, no, that's a tangerine. And so I realized, oh, this is an orange and that's a tangerine. When we say orange peel in Chinese, we usually mean tangerine peels, not your orange peel. And when we talk about tangerine peels, we talk about very, very, very specific tangerine peels. And these tangerine peels, we call them aged tangerine peels, just like aged ribeye. And so we take these things pretty seriously, and some people take these things really, really seriously. The traditional way of doing these tangerine peels or orange peels, you can say, is that my grandpa will put them in a jar, and the jar will be buried underground for a couple years, and then you dig it up and you use it. We call it chenpi, or aged tangerine peels. And usually, when I was growing up, a lot of my friends' house, after they eat the tangerine, they just let the peel to dry on the balcony and stuff, and they use that as tea later on. So so later on, you might not even believe this, but in China, there are people who collect these things, and they even put these tangerine peels in like a vault or like a bank, like just like I guess anything that you can save it. So those orange peels cost hundreds of dollars. So again, if you talk about the freshness of an herb, it really depends on which herb you're talking about. Not all the herbs, the bigger the better. Not all the herbs are the fresher the better. It depends on what kind of herbs you want to use. But again, usually most of the herbs, you can keep it easily within 2 or 3 years. Another herb that I want to point it out was Chinese archie. It's a kind of a grass that's very similar to an American sage, almost like kind of herb. But in China, this herb, the older, the better. And we don't sell it unless it's more than 3 years. The best is when they're after 7 years. So So not all herbs are the same, and you can't say how fresh are your herbs. That's not a professional question. But in certain herbs, the more time the better. In certain herbs, the more fresher the better. It just depends on what you use it for, and that's on the harvesting and the time period of the herbs. Hi, this is Yvonne Shu from Trustworthy Herbs again, and today we're gonna talk about the process of how to process herbs. Here's the thing. We want everybody to be healthy, and to be healthy, you don't need herbs. You need good sleep, good food, you need to breathe good air, and you need to take care of yourself. And because people don't do all these things, that's why a lot of people are into herbs and some people eat herbs to gain more energy and so on. But the truth is, we have a saying in Chinese herbs is every medicine has at least 30% toxicity. It's a way to warn people not to eat medicine. Because we recognize many of the herbs have some sort of toxicity in it or negative effect to it, so we use different ways to process these herbs. There are times where the herbs doesn't have any toxicity to it, and the reason why we process those herbs is because we want to enhance their medicinal use. For example, there is a flower in Chinese medicine called 款东花. It's a flower where if you use honey to process in a certain way, the medicinal use increased. So that's why certain herbs we like to process it. But when you process any herbs, you change the property of that herbs. You change the essence. You change the use of that herbs. So in Chinese, we use a lot of honey to process it, and it's very sad but true. There's no good honey in China anymore. I don't know what happened to the bees or to people's heart. People start to watering down their honey to make more money, and we couldn't find any good honey in China. That's why my mom had to get honey from the US, and we process it here. It's not that hard. You can even do it yourself. But the trick is to get good organic honey, and I think there's a brand, and there is a honey that we use that's pretty good. Another way we process some herbs is we use fermented alcohol like rice wine or sake. But these kind of rice wine, they're actually really high in alcohol, and you soak the herbs in this alcohol and you process it, you dry it, and that really enhances certain herbs. For example, shengdi or da huang, we have things that process that way. And my mom loved to do it herself. Some of the herbs, it just became a problem where it's too much, and we do it in China. But she just loved to process these herself. It's a pain in the ass. There are other herbs that we steam it, and we steam it with like black beans, and there are other herbs that we will heat it in a certain way. Again, different herbs, different ways. There's a whole another science to that. Maybe someday, if I have time, I'll share. But it's very complicated because each single herbs on how much you heat, how long time you heat, where you heat it, with what. It's really, there is a science to it. Sometimes it's called trial and error. And you just see what works, what doesn't. But we have actually couple people who's in our warehouse are very knowledgeable on that. Okay, let's talk about powdering. We do a powder service for our herbs, and it really depends on how fine you want those herbs to be powdered. Some herbs can be powdered, most of them can. Some of them we don't. For example, goji berries we don't. They just stick, all the glucose will just stick to the blades. Like shudi we won't. So certain herbs we just won't powder at all, no matter how much you pay me, because it's just not possible. And the way to deal with those kind of herbs, and if you want to get those herbs to be powdered, there is another extensive process to go through, where you dry the herbs as much as you can, and then you add other herbs that can be combined, and in many cases it will enhance the herbs. So if you combine bunch of herbs, yeah, maybe you can powder it. And another question is, how fine do you powder your herbs? It really depends on what you use them for. Usually there is a tea cut, and a lot of people like tea cut because they are easier to store, and if you put in a tea bag or whatever, it's easier. It's easier for me and my machines too. And okay, so let's talk about finer herbs. You don't want the herbs to be powdered like a flour kind of powdery thing. If you want to put them in capsules, because they just go. So you want it fine, but you don't want it that fine. And see, if you never powder the herbs yourself, you should. It's more complicated than you might think, because you cannot get all the stuff in the same size. Once the machine goes, there's some bigger chunks, there's smaller chunks. So how do you say some is fine, some is extra fine? Of course, in our industry, we have to shift it, and we have number on those shift size, but that's not how I would like to categorize how fine those powders are. So I go tea cut, fine, extra fine. That's just kind of my standard. And for capsules, fine is okay. You don't need extra fine. What sort of herbs do you need extra fine? It's really interesting. Herbs that's for external use. For example, we have a lot of herbs that's you use it like a paste. You put on your skin and so on. So those kind of herbs, because you want the skin to absorb it, that's why you want the extra fine, which is pretty complicated to make it, because you have to shift it and do it again and again until you get the best result. You can also powder the herbs yourself. We have some herbs like seashells that's harder to blend to make powder. We also have machines that does that. Yes, we do. But then again, when you get to extra fine kind of herbs, it takes longer time. It's more expensive. yeah, sometimes it's worth it, but it's just a lot of work. And that's on the powdering of the herbs. Thank you.